Welcome everyone to our webinar and thanks for joining us virtually. We wish Allyson and Scott could be with us in person here on the island, but we're thrilled they wanted to give this virtual lecture a go. And this way some of you who are joining us from afar can still attend, which is really cool. So before I introduce them, I just want to thank our sponsor, the Duke Soil Conservation District, for helping make this lecture possible. And to all of you who paid admission or have supported us through membership, we really appreciate your support. So today's talk on unusual edible plants is going to be presented to you by Allyson, Levy, and Scott Serrano, who are botanical artists and founders of a young public garden called Hortus, Arboretum, and Botanical Garden, which is in the Hudson Valley region of New York. And Allyson told me in a recent conversation that they first visited Polly Hill Arboretum 20 years ago and have visited many times over the years since. And their mission of experimentation and kind of pushing the boundaries of what can be grown in their USDA zone really mirrors Polly Hill's desire to experiment with what plants she could get to grow here on Martha's Vineyard from other parts of the world. So it's a neat connection there in terms of the organization's mission. So the Hortus Gardens are not open normal hours right now due to COVID, but visits are available by appointment. So be sure to check out their website, which I will post in the comments if you live in their area or visiting and you're interested. And I also want to congratulate Allyson and Scott on their Arboretum's recent level 2 accreditation by ArbNet and the Morton Arboretum. So they are official. And thanks so much to you both for being here. So if any of you watching do have questions during the talk, you can use that Q&A feature you'll see at the bottom of your Zoom screen. And we'll try to answer some of them at the end of the lecture if we have time. If you do not see the button for the Q&A, you can hover your mouse over the screen, or I think tap the screen if you're on a mobile device, and it should appear. So with that, I will turn it over to you, Allyson and Scott. Welcome.
Hi, welcome.
Hi.
I'll...
Can you see us okay? Everyone out there in virtual land?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, all right, here we go.
We are a small arboretum located in the mid-Hudson Valley of New York State. For about 18 years, we've been slowly building a plant collection that is now level 2 arboretum. And last year, we turned our gardens into a nonprofit organization. We focus on rare edible plants from around the world, but our collection also is centered around decorative trees with a special emphasis on rare and endangered plants, which we started to collect. Polly Hill was an early inspiration for us. We figured if she could start at the age of 50, start and build a botanical garden, we could start at the age of 30 and build one. So she was an early inspiration for us. We also host regular tours in conjunction with the Garden Conservancy, and we host landscaping and edible classes. Several times a year, we also offer an artist residency, which is seen here. That's one of our residents. So you can look at our Arboretum website for an application to study and do botanical work here at the gardens. So because we cannot be in front of you today, we're happy that Polly Hill has allowed this opportunity to give us a go at our first Zoom talk in front of an audience. So with that, we will start. Thank you to Polly Hill staff. The first one we're starting out with is Che, C-H-E. Its science name is Maclura tricuspidata. Che is a close relative of mulberry, and it has a very, very complicated flavor which combines mulberry, fig, and watermelon.
And lychee.
Yes, my wife feels that it tastes like lychee. It has very beautiful foliage. Plant gets about 12 to 20 feet high. I would caution you that if you're going to get Che, you definitely want to get a grafted self-fertile female plant. In the wild, these plants have male and female as part of their species. So it's very difficult to determine whether you have a male or female plant. So it's good to stay safe and just get a self-fertile grafted female. These are essentially an edible small Osage Orange. So it's now Multiflora. So it's generally grafted on Osage Orange to make it a clean, small, neat fruiting tree. We are on the end of its fruiting capacity. The fruit starts to fall off toward the end of the fall when it gets cold. With that being said, we still often will get 2 weeks of fruit off of this, and it has a really distinct, wonderful flavor.
Visitors to the garden, when they get to taste this fruit, are almost like, wow, what is that? And actually, this would make a great specimen for those of you who live out on the vineyard, because it's basically can use that extra heating zone that you guys have that we don't have in the Hudson Valley to have a longer harvest period. But other than that, it's a great plant.
No,
and you just
no
need,
pests.
Yeah, it's wonderful.
And this should be able to take 20 below zero. It's fairly hardy.
This beautiful plant is in the dogwood family. This is Cornice moss, also known as Cornelian cherry. I love to talk about this plant because instead of planting forsythia, this is even earlier flowering than that plant, and it supports some pollinators. This is the flowers just starting out before it's leafed out in early spring. Really pretty, very special. In the Hortus gardens, we have it planted in an area that probably gets about 6 to 8 hours of sunlight, so it can take some part shade. It's a tall growing, multi-limbed plant, so it's kind of a tree or shrub, depending on how you look at it, that can grow to be 20 to 25 feet. You do need to have more than one plant in order to have it bear fruit. And you can see it has these beautiful shiny berries that pretty much are ripe toward the end of August here in the Hudson Valley. And you see the leaf is very indicative of the Cornice family. There is a species that we grow where the fruit is really variable and can kind of even be a little bit not so tasty, but
Astringent.
It's a little astringent, but there are some wonderful cultivars out there as well that we recommend. Sunrise is one, Red Star is another. There's even one that is yellow, just called yellow, which is this image over here. We know people who will take the fruit and make a jam out of it. Personally, I like to just stand in front of the shrub and eat the fruit, which is really delicious. There's really no pests whatsoever to this, so this is a really low maintenance fruiting shrub, fruiting tree that I think deserves a place in your garden.
And this is zone 4, so this could probably even take 30 below zero. And it grows in bad, poor quality soil too. It doesn't need, as long as it's well drained. Very, very easy.
And this beautiful flower is from a black currant bush, highly decorative. I talk about fruiting plants being highly ornamental a lot. I think that often gets overlooked when we're thinking about edible plantings. We kind of categorize something as either being edible or ornamental, but most edible plants are highly ornamental. And here is, again, American black currant in flower with a kind of maple shaped leaf. In the Hortus gardens, this is also in a part shaded environment where it probably gets, like, when I say part shaded, it means it gets 6 to 8 hours of sunlight. If it was in more sun, it probably would just be more productive. But as it is, you can see there's a lot of fruit on this plant. And you need to have several of the bushes in order to really have good fruit set. And when it starts rocking, it's going. And so we could have fruit on this for maybe over a month. And you could see in this particular image, the fruit ripens over a long period of time. So you can go out and enjoy some, and it's okay if the birds are getting some, because inevitably they do. And I like to eat this out of hand. Scott, this is not his favorite currant at all. He feels it's a little bit.
It has a strong musky flavor. The
just-
people who love black currant really like that quality.
Yeah.
And the people who don't like that quality really don't like it. I like the red and white currants much more.
This is a clove currant, a type of black currant that's known for its slightly larger flowers and for its heavy fragrance. And I actually love this. I have 2 of these, not so much for the fruit, which is perfectly delicious, but more because it's so fragrant in early spring. So I have this planted near an area that I walk by on a daily basis. And then I wanted to show you in the ribes family, this is pink champagne currant, and this is it in flower. Again, notice the maple shaped type leaf, highly decorative. Pink champagne currant, as well as the red currant that I'm going to show you, I feel needs a little bit more sun than the black currant. So I would, if you were choosing and you had the sunny side, I probably would choose for this. Again, the flowers, fruits.
And the fruit's beautiful. It looks like sort of transparent pink pearls. They can be quite ornamental.
And on the sprigs, you could see that it's pretty much been hit by either birds or other, yeah. This is not my favorite currant. Scott loves it, but it does make a great addition to a salad, or if you were able to collect enough of them, make a great jam. And then really, like, does anything get any more gorgeous than this? This is red currant, simply gorgeous. This is happening now in the gardens.
Again, stripped by animals probably. We didn't get to that.
And it's fairly pest resistant. So these shrubs can get, when they're full grown, maybe after 10 years, they can get to be 8 to 10 feet. So they can get quite large. So you want to site them in a place that you can just kind of let them be.
American elderberry, Sambucus canadensis, zone 3, very, very cold hardy, very tough. Adaptable, almost kind of an alley cat species, can grow in almost anything. Wet, slightly swampy, clay, heavy clay. I've seen this in Florida on the side of a road in sandy sites, often found as a roadside ditch. When it grows into a large bush like that, it becomes a glorious, beautiful large shrub. Adaptable to full sunlight or part shade. Almost large parts of this plant can be used as food. The flowers and the berries can be cooked, and the berries should not really be eaten raw. They're slightly toxic, not terribly toxic, but slightly toxic, and they should be cooked to make jams or like
syrup is amazing.
My wife uses them for. The flowers make wonderful fritters with dipped like in sort of pancake batter.
Great for beverage, delicious. You can make kind of a bit of like a lemonade a lot with using the floral. It's very
fragrant.
It's very fragrant,
lemony.
Delicious.
And that bush, that bush, we did not plant that bush. A bird pooped out a seed many, many years ago, and so now we have a gigantic, huge shrub that's maybe 15 to 18 feet by 15 to 18 feet. That yields thousands of berries, and again, it's in poor quality soil and parts shade. To get large amounts of food in poor quality soil and large shade is a glorious, wonderful thing. I think this is a wonderful, underappreciated American shrub. You can see that that's just one sprig of the fruit. There are improved fruit cultivars. There's York and Adams, which produce berries that are slightly larger, but the flavor is similar.
Yeah, you couldn't really tell the difference.
Yes. This is the only citrus in the entire citrus family that can take 16 inches of snow and go below 0. This is Flying Dragon, which is Ponoceros trifoliata, Flying Dragon. It's a contorted bowed form of the plant. This is a very, very crude sour orange that can be ground down and cooked and made into marmalade and sour orange juice. You need sugar added to this. It can't really be eaten out of hand. It has beautiful kind of ornamental features and very, very hooked thorns. So this should not really be put on a walkway where children kind of get up close to it. It should be regarded sort of like a cactus. You just have to carefully pick it. Otherwise, it's beautiful. It looks great with 16 inches of snow in it. And those are the sour oranges ripening. Our one tree will sometimes get 70, 50, 70 oranges. And this has gone below zero multiple times without major damage. So
I've seen guests to the garden actually just snack on them. To
them
me, it's a
raw.
little too much. And I tend to gather the fruit up in several batches, and I will use the juice. You need to have a juicer because you will go through with, let's just say, 50 oranges. You will have about, I don't know, 10,000 seeds and a quarter cup of juice. And maybe I'm exaggerating a little bit.
A little bit.
But not that
Yeah.
much.
So,
But highly worth it. And as Scott said, the ornamentation value is super high. And you can see they're
Beautiful.
just really
Yeah.
the hooked quality of the branches are
Bark,
great. And then with a little snow, and then look at that.
That's an ice storm on ours.
Scott and Allison, can you
Yes.
guys hear me?
Yes.
I just wanted to interject to say that we had a request that if possible, if you happen to know as you're going through the plants whether any of them are deer resistant, if you could just mention that.
Okay.
So I would say not a problem. Generally, I have a thing where I feel there's not a thing as a deer-resistant plant. However, with that caveat, the last plant that we just showed you right here, Flying Dragon, I would
They're not gonna
seriously
love that
doubt
too much.
that a deer is going to go through this. But moving forward, I will try and make a note, address it. But
Yeah.
something like what I'm going to talk about next, which is Goji Berry, I would say they might do some nibbling on, especially because the newer shoots are more tender. And when I show you a picture of how the plant looks. So like I was about to say, this is Goji Berry in flower, which is happening now in the Hortus gardens. And the fun thing about Goji, it's one of those plants that flowers and fruits at the same time. And most people know about Goji as a dried fruit. And there's a reason for that. It's because fresh, eaten right off the plant, it's fairly astringent and a little bit watery. And Scott actually thinks it tastes a little tomatoey.
Like a watery tomato.
Which is really not, it's really not that pleasant. So,
But it is used in traditional Chinese cuisine for making tomato soups.
And chicken soup,
soups,
it's, yeah,
yes.
that kind of thing.
So this is very medicinal. It's very good for you. There's lots of minerals and antioxidants. So someone told us his mother used to make it for him as a cold soup. So it's a traditional food.
The young leaves also can be eaten as a salad. They're highly perishable, so you kind of have to have most of your salad ready, and then you can add the new young goji. Again, here's that whole ornamentation value of a plant, just simply stunning. And although this looks high in color, I probably would wait a little bit longer until I would pick them, and sometimes they'll even have a slight wrinkle to the fruit. Not many animals seem to pester or bother this, so it's been pretty easy for us to grow. The fruit ripens over almost a 2-month period of time, well into frost for us, so that we can harvest. And you get a handful here and there, so I tend to just dry them in bunches and in batches, and it works really well. And this is the plant which is not sure whether it's a vine or it's a weeping shrub, and it hasn't really made up its mind. So partially when you are thinking about maybe planting, so when you're thinking about also putting this plant in your garden, placement's really important. And it's taken us a little while to kind of figure out the right place for this, but having it on a ledge or a stone wall embankment where it can kind of drape over, give you that weeping form is very nice. You can definitely prune it back in early spring or it fruits on new wood. And this actually, if you look toward the lower part of the screen, it's probably already doing its own layering so that I could have more plants if I wanted it.
Yeah. This is sort of people have to deal with it somehow. We used to try to trim it up neat, and you can do that. people put stakes in the ground and kind of tie it to a stake, or they train it on a garden wall as a convenient way. We stopped fighting the crazy, rampant, falling all over quality and just let it be. Like what she just said, could a deer really decimate that? I don't think so. Once it gets woody and thick, they would probably chew on the tender soft shoots, but they would not love this.
But if they did that, then they're going to be going onto your flower buds, so you might not get the fruit that you're planting this for.
But
so
it does flower over a long period of time. These are gooseberries. This is one of our favorite fruits. Also in the ribes family, a close relative, cousin, sister to currants. Gooseberries are larger than currants, and they have a more sprightly, intense flavor. You're looking at Jan's Prairie, spelled Jahns, which was a wild plant found in Ontario, and it doesn't taste wild. It is completely filled with sugar. It's very rich and delicious. There's roughly 2 types of gooseberries. They're tart, spicy gooseberries and sweet gooseberries.
And this one that looks like it would be tart is actually so sweet. It's crazy. This is Invicta.
Invicta. This is an English varietal. Many English varietals get fungus and mold, but this one has never gotten. It seems very tough and resistant. The spicy gooseberries, and if you've ever had a gooseberry pie or gooseberry jelly that have the kind of a cranberry spicy quality, Hinnomaki red and yellow are wonderful. Jewel is wonderful too. I think this is Hinnomaki red.
And this is, I believe, a jewel here.
Yes, yeah. So when a plant is really prolific, you can see it cranks huge amounts of fruit. These do well in Scandinavian and Northern European countries, which means they don't like humidity and heat when it's 90 degrees. What that means in our garden is essentially the plant says, I hate this, I'm going to sleep, and drops its leaves. And so it looks a little ugly and unkempt by midsummer, but then every spring it starts up.
Yeah, but that's okay because you've already gone through all the fruit. So this might not be something I would necessarily feature in my garden. I would have it tucked away in an area, but it does need to be in full sun. And we tend to give it some potash, some ash in early spring as a fertilizer. And there is, I don't know if you could tell in this photo, there are some thorns on some of them. So that it could be a negative, but it also could be a positive in terms of being deer resistant.
And just as a side note, Jan's Prairie does not have thorns.
Right.
That's why Jan's Prairie feels like it's a bred variety. It's really wonderful.
And then you could see just from this image that there's lots of different shapes and sizes and delicious.
Yes,
yeah.
Great. Gooseberry, ribes, sawfly does again attack the foliage. It doesn't really attack the fruit. They can defoliate plants if you look at them and can squish them and get rid of them. We use an organic pesticide, which is Captain Jack's, which seems to get rid of them. So it's just something to think about. One of my wife's favorites.
This is Goomy, Elliagness, Multiflora. And this is it in early spring when it's just in its glory. Just super beautiful. I'll show you some close-up images of the small flowers and the leaves that have some little brown scale all over it. Again, highly decorative. And these small flowers are super fragrant. I can smell when this is opened up, like from 30 feet away. This is the bush shrub, multi-limbed shrub in its glory that's happening right now in the Hortus gardens. Full of fruit. The fruit are small, but they have a flavor that's reminiscent of sour cherry. You can see it here. And the fruit, again, highly decorative. It has the little brown scale all over it. Really pretty. This, for us, basically ripens over a 1 month period of time. And we have some competitions with birds who live right inside this plant, but it's not really competition. This is one of those fruiting bushes that I'm fine with sharing with all the other critters out there, especially the chipmunks this year. And you can eat it out of hand. It has an edible seed, but we tend to spit it out. And when my son was much younger, we would have these great long distance spitting contests, which I thought would then give us all these plants because it is a relative of the autumn olive, which is known to be invasive, but much to our chagrin and really much to our pleasure, we were not able to produce a lot of plants that way. And I guess in the 18 years that we've been growing this, I think we've had 4 or 5 seedlings sprout up here and there.
Which is good because this is not invasive like autumn olive.
Yeah.
We often say this is the well-behaved sister species of
Right.
autumn olive. So if you want autumn olive in your garden, but you're afraid that it's going to put 1,000 seeds
And you
into
should
there,
be
and you
afraid.
should be afraid, this is contained.
Yeah.
It does not do that. And one bush is more than enough that you'll get thousands
You
of
could tell
berries.
you don't need more than that. It's self-fertile. And the nice thing for those of you who are into permaculture ideas, this is a nitrogen fixing plant. A lot of times people will plant this in orchard settings in between rows of fruit trees like apples or pears to better the soil. So it's just something to consider.
And somebody mentioned deer resistance. A large established bush like this, it would be
Right.
hard for a deer to kill a
When
bush
you
like
see
this.
when you see this,
It's
yeah.
so big, especially woody. They'd nibble on it, but they wouldn't decimate this plant.
So I'd
If
say
you can
this is worth
protect it for a couple seasons,
Yeah.
it'll be fine.
Again, beautiful fruit.
Hazelnuts, another one of our favorite things. Hazelnuts are extremely adaptable to poor quality soil. They'll do good in nice soil, but they'll also grow in sandy soil. I've seen these near beach areas in Martha's Vineyard.
I just want to interject on this. There are both male flowers and female flowers. The male flowers, I think, are pretty obvious,
yeah, they
right?
open quickly.
But the female flowers are really tiny. So I'm going to show you a close-up of a female flower
Just starting, yeah. Yep,
right there.
that's the female flower. We have a beautiful purple-leafed varietal that's called Rotzeller, and there's another one called Ruby. You need two hazelnut bushes to produce the nuts. American hazelnuts and European hazelnuts will cross-pollinate, and when chipmunks and squirrels steal your nuts and make little nut caches, sometimes they inadvertently start baby plants, and that's a purple-leafed hazelnut that a squirrel has taken and forgotten about. You can see how beautiful the purple-leafed ones are. They're pretty pest resistant. There is one major blight that has attacked large industries in the United States trying to start a hazelnut industry.
In the Pacific Northwest specifically.
Yeah, and in New York State too. I always say if you're going to put in 50 hazelnut bushes, you should look for disease-resistant cultivars. If you just want to put in 3 or 4, I don't think you really need to worry about it. We've had these about 17 years and we've never gotten the blight, but it's just something to think about.
And we do have a large hazelnut collection. So,
Yeah.
And again, for the deer, that deer question. So something like this, while it's smaller, would need to be protected for sure. But you could see this
Once this
specimen
gets
is
like a
what,
tree,
this is
yeah.
like 20 feet.
Yeah.
So it might do some low browsing, but it wouldn't hurt. But it's something to consider that,
American hazelnuts might get 8 to 12 feet.
Yeah.
The European one, which you're looking at, might get up to 20 feet.
Is that gorgeous?
And those are the corals, the sheaths which protect the nut on the purple-leafed hazelnut. And this is probably an American hazelnut, the more yellow-colored male flowers. And that's a giant hazelnut, bred variety like from the candy and confection industry. We have Slate and Geneva. The Slate tree is incredible. That's my favorite. And again, that's a hybrid of American and European. You can see that's a handful of Slate nuts. They're all, the tastes are all basically the same. It's just size of nuts. They're all wonderful.
This plant is Lysestria formosa, and it has 2 common names. One of them is Himalayan honeysuckle. So it is in the, in that family, but it's also known as the chocolate berry, and that's for good reason, because these beautiful little flowers that were in the Hortus gardens about 2 to 3 weeks ago, present on this bush, start to produce these wonderful little berries that you could see in this photo here. So we've grown this for maybe a dozen years, and we initially started this shrub outside in the gardens, and it grew for maybe 3 or 4 or 5 seasons pretty well.
Yeah,
We got
yeah.
berries. This is really one of those plants that some sources say zone 6, some say zone 7. However, they all acknowledge that this plant will have some dieback in a harsh winter. So I think that this could be a wonderful shrub for those of you who do live out on Martha's Vineyard, because it would do pretty well in your warmer climate
Slightly
than
warmer,
Hudson
yeah.
Valley. So with that said, because I love this plant so much for its berries, we ended up in this, you could see this shot was taken outside of the greenhouse where maybe in this one you can kind of, if you look in the upper, it's inside. So inside the greenhouse just gives us a longer growing period. And so it's starting to fruit now, whereas when we had it outside would probably not be in such a heavy fruit set. And the berries to me have this really complicated flavor, like coffee, red wine, mixed with some caramel, with even some bittersweet chocolate. And they have to be a little bit squishy, so you kind of
The
take
black
them.
ones
The black
are
ones are ripe.
Not the red ones.
So it's a little bit challenging to eat. It's not something you're going to go and make a dessert of, but it's something that you could stand in front of and snack. And as you see, it's simply a gorgeous plant. It's really beautiful. So
for those of you who are in colder areas, the main thing is to try to protect this with a heavy mulch or a bucket. Often what I say is this is hardy to zone 6, 10 below 0, but what it is, it absolutely hates late frost.
Right.
That's the one. It's like you shouldn't cut this back. You should leave the stalks dead in the ground with the mulch and wait till frost is past and then clean it up. That's what I think has killed our plant in the past.
just beautiful. And yes, deer would like this plant.
Probably. It's
Yes,
tender and
tender.
soft. Honeyberries. This is the earliest fruit that comes into our garden. This is before strawberries and it's before blueberries. This is from Siberia and Japan. This literally goes into winters that are probably 40, 50 below 0, where it survives in Siberia. That means when it's flowering, like you're seeing, if it drops to 15 or 20 degrees, it says, who cares? I'm from Siberia. It doesn't really matter to me. I've had these drop into the teens and still produce fruit.
And you could tell in this photo that the background trees, they're all, a lot of them are deciduous, so they haven't even leafed out, and that this shrub is already in flower.
Yeah, this is also a honeysuckle like the last one. This is Lonicera Sorelia variety adulis, and it's a nice contained plant. This is a good plant for a tight space. If you want something that has blueberry qualities, but you can't fit a large shrub, these get 3 to 4 feet about. The main problem with these is you want to get early flowering varietals or late flowering varietals, and they're often sold as a set, and the names all sound like the same, and it's very confusing because of the horticulture industry. So just make sure you get 2 as a set that are compatible. And the fruit often hides underneath the bushes, so you think there's not really fruit on my bush, and you lift up a branch and you see suddenly dozens and dozens of fruit. Yeah. People say this is as sweet as a blueberry. It's not true. It's not true.
But it could be considered that way because it is the first fruit of the season, and we're just so desperate to have something. So,
and it's about a month and a half to 2 months before blueberry, which is what's great about it.
Yeah.
And we made jam for the first time. You add sugar, tastes like blueberry jam, except it's 2 months early.
And they're fairly large size. I know that certain cultivars have larger size berries. This has been bred for years and years and years. So it's
Canada and Arctic places. Mm-hmm. There's a whole bunch of Canadian varietals. Most of the stuff is coming from Canada because up in places where you can't really grow a lot of things, this produces fruit that can be made into jelly.
And it's a handsome shrub as well.
It's also pretty.
Like the leaves are beautiful.
Very pretty.
Yep. Talk about pretty. This is Arctic kiwi, very handsome. This is actually a male.
The leaves are supposed
plant.
to be that color.
This is, sometimes we get people who come visit the gardens like, oh, it looks like there's a disease on your plant. But this is what it's meant to be, high coloration, very variable. And Arctic kiwi, Actinida colomicta, is one of those vines that produces fruit relatively early and is gorgeous at the same time. And so these are the little small flower buds that are going to open. And when they do, they have these small flowers in comparison to the leaf size. And the flowers are lightly fragrant and they're beautiful. And they produce these little kiwis. If you can see the shot, This is, I believe, from last year, and we have an area that is just set up with all kiwi dome, and we probably had I don't know, 10,000 pieces of fruit. It was ridiculous. We couldn't.
Ridiculous.
We was making people take them
Fill
and
their
stuff them in their pockets. So this kind of fruit is one of those, again, that it's better off eaten out of hand. We've tried in the past to make jam out of them. Doesn't work unless you like to eat a brown jam. I have found that freezing them works well, and you can add them to smoothies, so that's nice. And the interesting thing about Arctic kiwi is that you'll see, if you start looking around, there's probably 50 different varieties with all sorts of, the males have male names and the females have female names. But pretty much, even though the shapes and sizes are all different, the flavor is all the same.
For those of you who are writing varietals, on the bottom of the screen, the double-sized ones that have a flat kind of flask shape, those are Victor. Those were found in the wild in Siberia by a botanist. They were introduced. So. And
one of the things we get asked a lot about is, well, I have kiwi, I've been growing it for 10 years and it's never flowered or fruited. And so I often ask, well, do you have any color on any of your plants? Do the leaves have that leaf color? They're like, no, it's just solid green. Well, then you're probably growing Chinese kiwi. And that's Activita arguta, Chinese kiwi. And so the thing about Chinese kiwi is that it really doesn't start to mature. Again, it's dioecious, so you need the male and female plant, but it doesn't start to set flowers until at least 10 to 12 years into its life. And then even when it starts to flower, it doesn't mean that you're going to have any fruit. So we have this plant in a small enclosed garden on support system, and Scott was finally like, let's get rid of it. After a dozen years, nothing's going on. And of course, after that happened, the vine produced 5 flowers, so I was all excited, so we kept it. And then the following year, I had maybe 15 flowers and 2 pieces of fruit. And then finally, the following year, I had a bonanza. And when we tasted the fruit, we were like, wow, because the flavor of this particular kiwi is much better. It's much more complex. In any event, whatever you're growing, and we do suggest the Colomito just because you can start getting fruit within 3 to 5 years, you're going to need to have it on some sort of structure. Are deer going to eat this? Yes, they will eat it. This fruit tends to go on, it fruits on new wood. So pruning it back is really a must. So you got to be into like keeping something at bay. It's kind of like the goji that we showed you earlier. This, unlike the honeyberry in the previous slide, which needs no maintenance, this is a slightly higher maintenance plant, but we feel well worth it and could be great for shading a gazebo or a structure.
Yeah, and somebody asked the question about deer resistance. You can prune almost half of this vine, 3/4 of it off, and it'll still grow fine. It's hard to kill this plant. So this would qualify as fairly deer resistant, deer tough. If you're going to, again, you have to protect a small, delicate plant. But after it gets 4 or 5 years, it gets thick, almost like a small tree trunk, and an animal won't be able to kill it at that point. It's tough.
And then the one last thing I'll add before we move on is that this particular plant, both of them, can do fine in a part shade setting or full sun. So this dome is in a full sun setting, so it produces copious amounts of fruit. But in a part shade, we still get a decent amount of fruit, and it's also planted right underneath a white walnut tree, so the juglone in the ground doesn't seem to thwart it at all. So just worth noting.
Medlar, Mespelius germanaica. Medlar was brought in the 1600s from Turkey in the Middle East, Iran probably also, into Europe with the Crusades and through, exchange between the West and the East. Medlar is a distinctive kind of a small tree with flowers that are quite pretty. They look like small roses from a distance. And then it's followed by a rock hard type of fruit, which, if allowed to grow up until around November, starts to ferment and get soft, and it goes through a period of what is called bledding, which is a polite word for saying rotting. And it acquires the flavor of spiced applesauce and cloves and cinnamon. And the best thing about medlar, it is the only winter fruit. We were picking it early and having it ferment, but someone said, no, let it wrinkle on the tree. Just let them sit in. So we walk out through the snow in January and December, and we pick this up. And also because it's sort of chocolate brown, it doesn't advertise that it's bright red fruit. And so birds don't bother this a great deal. Chipmunks and squirrels hit it, but not very much. So we have fruit through the winter and come out and collect it. You only need one tree. It's self-fertile. And that's zone 5, 20-ish below zero, 25 below zero, fairly tough, fairly resilient.
And again, if you're not a big fan of having applesauce that to me is slightly flavored with berry notes, then the high decorative value of this plant can't be underrated. It's beautiful.
It looks like a rose bush too.
It's gorgeous.
It looks pretty much like a rose bush.
This is Paciflora and Granada. So this is a fairly vigorous vine in the south, and actually it's considered invasive in many states.
Although it's native.
Although it is a native, but in New York State and the Hudson Valley, we tried growing it outside on a support structure, and we were very successful with growing the beautiful, beautiful flowers. And we could even get it to fruit, as you could see in this photo here. This was done on our trellis outside. However, what we noticed is we could never get the fruit to fully mature outside. And so we had this idea to bring it inside the greenhouse and to grow it inside. And it does really well in there. It attracts all sorts of pollinators. And you can see here are the flower buds just starting to open up. Beautiful, handsome triloba kind of leaves. And this is Alba. This is a white cultivar. We believe in diversity of our planting, so we feel like planting more than one type of cultivar will increase fruit set, and also the inherent beauty of it can't be understated. And this is a shot from within the greenhouse. So this is the fruit that actually ripens around August into September. And then you can see in this shot, we've had, yeah, it was pretty ridiculous. So this definitely needs a support system to have it scramble over. Our big mistake, it's not a terrible mistake, but now it is acting like it probably does in the South, like in Georgia, and it's coming up in the cracks of our walking path inside our greenhouse and inside pretty much all my beds, but there could be worse things.
It's a beautiful nuisance.
It's a beautiful nuisance, so be forewarned. I do think in Martha's Vineyard, you could certainly grow this. We know people that are trying. It's just one of those plants that needs to be coddled early on. It needs to have a really substantial root system before putting it in the ground, because if it doesn't, it's not going to make it through the winter. So it's something needs to have a substantial root system, planted early in the season, and then put in the ground and just watered, and it should be fine. It's not something you're going to put in August.
And the most sun possible, right. 8 to 10 hours. And so basically you want to put it in Rolls-Royce grade, best quality compost soil in the best position.
Yeah, and then the fruit, although if you've ever had a tropical passion fruit, it doesn't have the same notes of that flavor, but it's pretty darn good anyway. We eat it right out of hand, and we make a jelly out of it. I make a hot sauce with it. It's really scrumptious. So
yeah, it's great.
We love this plant.
I always call this the queen of American fruits. This is pawpaw, Asamina triloba. Hillbilly mango, whatever you want to call it. Pawpaw is a wonderful tree. There's two problems with a pawpaw. One is you have to wait so damn long to get the fruit. The fruit often takes 10 to 12 years to develop, and that's because the tree is driven by a taproot. The taproot goes down and down and down and down until it gets to a certain length of the tree. It might be 10 or 15 feet in the soil. It doesn't do anything, and then suddenly the next year, the tree's full with fruit. So that's the first problem. The other main bugaboo with pawpaws is when they start out, they need a little bit of shade until they get about 4 or 5 feet, and then they need lots of sun. And these are the flowers opening up here, just starting. And they have these beautiful,
gorgeous
strange,
flowers,
dark
beautiful
purple flowers that hang like upside, like little bells.
Yeah.
And that's a fly. There's a myth that carrion flies are the only thing that pollinates this, and that's not true. It's just flies. Any fly seems to like this. And that's the pollen opening
or
up.
Other
or other
insects in
insects
there,
there, beetle or
absolutely
something.
Stunning.
And that's me hand pollinating, because flies unfortunately are a bit lazy. They're not like butterflies and wasps, which move fast. If it's kind of cool, they don't pollinate as much. So I take a little paintbrush and I cross pollinate from one tree to another. And you need 2 trees for fruit set. So you need to have at least 2 trees. And that's a baby pawpaw starting out. And that's when they're getting big. That could be 4 or 5 inches long. The flavor.
This image is from this week. I took a shot of this. Yeah.
Some of them are finally developing. The flavor is sort of like banana custard with a little bit of pineapple juice or vanilla.
Mixed in with a little bit of deliciousness. So good.
We tend to like them when they're first softened up. They have kind of a coconut flavor. When they get more fermented, more like pudding quality.
I think I like them fermented.
Yeah. Then they get more intense.
And beautiful
flavor.
leaves, really long
and
tropical leaves,
gold
gorgeous.
Folds. So great American plant.
Beautiful looking fruit. Again,
there are lots of varietals. If you can get your hands on them, there are a whole series of new giant fruit varietals that are named after Native American tribes, and they're patented and copyrighted, and some of them are almost the size of mangoes. They're huge.
You can see this is a cut fruit. So the ones that are just the straight species, they tend to be super seedy, but that's okay, because if you're into it, you can go ahead and with a little bit of scarification, plant those seeds right away and have your own pawpaw trees and wait 10 to 12 years until you get your own fruit.
And any ripe pawpaw is great.
Delicious.
Whether it's a varietal or straight species, they're all great. And this would be the king of American fruits. This is a American wild persimmon, Diasporus virginiana. We love John Rick, the grafted varietal.
That's what you're seeing
John
right
Rick,
now in this image.
That can get about 20 feet. It can get large. If you have a backyard and you have a confined space and you only have a short spot, I would recommend Zucchus. That's spelled S-Z-U-K-I-S, and you'll see that in a second. That's a dwarf tree that tends to crank huge amounts of fruit out.
That's the fruit.
Yeah, that's probably a John Rick. The flavor of a to me is like butterscotch and molasses. It's not quite as sweet as an Asian persimmon, but it makes up for it by having rich flavor. That's a Zucchus.
Yeah, for sure.
And you looked at the bark before. That has sort of a beautiful, attractive bark.
Gorgeous.
Kind of patterning.
Mature plant.
Yeah, and you can see in the fall from the next slide, one tree can have a huge amount of fruit ripening into the fall.
And luckily, this is one of those fruiting trees where if you get the right cultivar, that's all you need. It's just one.
Look for a self-fertile varietal or 2 self-fertile varietals.
And it would prefer to be in a full sun site as much as possible.
Can take a little shade. Soil adaptable, grows in bad clay soil, grows in nice quality soil, grows in sandy soil.
And so you can see the fruit is small because that's Scott's hand. So but they're full of so much flavor, and we have noticed that not all persimmons have so many seeds. Some have a little bit more than others, but here's a shot of what the inside looks like. That looks like that
gooey
particular one was seedless, and they do kind of blacken on the outside when they're ripe, so that you kind of know.
Someone said the texture is sort of like pancake batter when it's ripe. They're squishy and soft.
It's true. And then the nice thing about these is that you can also, and sometimes you just can't get to them because the fruit is so much higher than you are on the branch, is that they do fine when they get hit by cold and the sugars change inside, and they even get even sweeter, and they're quite delicious. So really, this is one of those plants that if you're looking for that one fruiting plant for your home, this for the backyard is really, I highly recommend.
Yeah, get a grafted varietal.
And we were just showing this because it's Martha's Vineyard, that because you have a slightly warmer climes than we do.
We've planted a fuyu tree inside of our greenhouse. There's a couple of fuyu varietals that'll take below 0, and this is one of them. This is called Ichi Kike Jiro. It means the first life of a Jiro plant. And this year we've been blessed by by the tree, probably there's about 50 pieces of fruit so far on it. And we're hoping it's an experiment, but Martha's Vineyard is a bit milder.
So
We
we
might
think
get-
this could
yeah,
do fine
yeah.
there. It's worth
Definitely,
trying. It's
and
worth
it's
trying,
one
yeah.
tree, it's self-fertile. It's definitely worth trying. It's great. And that's quince. That's one of my favorite things. She likes
Well,
bush quince.
we'll talk about what
I
I
like tree quince.
Yeah.
This is the quince from the Mediterranean and Turkey, which has beautiful pink and white kind of candy cane striped flowers.
Beautiful, handsome tree.
Yeah,
Very.
small, medium-sized tree, maybe getting 8 to 10, 8 to 12 feet. Beautiful. Flowers are lovely. A tough, adaptable, very cold hardy. The fruit tastes to me like a cross between pineapple and peaches, and it smells like flowers.
Yeah.
Divine. This was one of the revelation plants to me. I never grew up around quince, and now having eaten it, it's one of my favorite things. I've now put in about 6 different quince trees. Self-fertile, has to be cooked to be eaten, with the exception of Baltic quinces, and that's one of the Baltic quinces. That's Kagonskaya. Kagunskaya. This is from Turkey, the new Turkish cultivars. These can be picked in the fall and brought in for a few weeks and then cut with a knife thin for
Really
put into
thin,
salads.
yeah.
But they have kind of a crunchy flavor. Is that as good as quince cooked down and made into membrillo? And absolutely not, but it's good. And that's, I think, the Russian one, which is called Arana Matanaya.
Say that again.
Arana Matanaya.
So this is my favorite.
Yes.
This is the flowering quince. Some of you might be familiar with this just because this tends to be planted in older houses and farms. Most people don't realize that it actually will produce fruit, but in order to get the fruit, you need to have more than one cultivar or one plant planted. So there's because it's an old-fashioned plant and it's been around for a long time, there's many different sizes and shapes and colors. So some are in the red to pink family, some have that more peachy quality, some grow to be 2 feet, some grow to be 8 feet, but they all produce, if you have more than one plant, these small little hard fruits that you cannot eat out of hand.
Absolutely not.
Not at all. And these are a little bit more work than the Baltic or European quince in terms of prepping them because they're full of seeds. And you can see this is one large bush that is just full of fruit. But if you have the patience, and I'm sure most of you do out there, this makes a delicious quince jelly as well as a quince paste known as membrillo. And for those of you wanting to know what can I plant that's edible that a deer won't eat, this is it, because the fruit will actually remain on the ground even with a deer walking by. So that's a no-brainer.
Yeah, we'll have a chipmunk eat 1 or 2, and it's like eating a raw lemon peel. And they're in disgust, they'll leave it alone. So this is nice. It can lay around for a while.
It does need, I feel like this needs full sun, but it's really a low maintenance plant. And as I showed you earlier with the flowers, many of you might recognize these. These are used a lot in floral arrangements in early spring, just as a sign of spring. So I just think it's such a great plant. And here's another great plant that I love. This is a vine called Schizandra Vine. And this one is a cultivar called Eastern Prince, which I'm really grateful that we learned about. It's a self-fertile variety, or else most Schizandra is a dioecious. And I do love this very much. It's growing here in the South Garden in a shade spot, actually.
Yeah,
this would get fried if we had it in full sun. So it could take a couple hours of morning light. I really don't think deer would bother this plant too much. And it has very small, beautiful flowers. Sometimes they're considered insignificant because they're so small, but it's really the berries, the fruit, that you want to kind of get to know. And the Chinese have been using this plant for hundreds of years. It's one of their top 50 important medicinal plants. And this plant's also known as 5-flavor berry. And it's known for its having 5 different flavors at the same time. So it goes from being sweet to bitter to salty to pungent and sour but all in one time. So is this something that I'm gonna stand in front of my bush and eat out of hand? Maybe one or two. And I kind of see that women tend to like this plant more than
It's true.
men. But we tend to use the fruit when it's fresh like this and make an incredible drink using a little bit of a sweetener, and it tastes like pink lemonade. It's absolutely delicious, and we can a lot of it and we share it when we have people come to the garden. I tend to take this and I dry the berries, and I use the berries throughout the year. I put it in my smoothies or in like a granola mix, and it has so many health benefits that it would take me a whole nother hour to go through them. But it's a very important plant in Chinese medicine, and I just love just how beautiful it is in ornamentation value as well.
Yeah, if you can imagine strawberry lemonade that's completely loaded with vitamins, so it's like an athlete's medicine.
Yeah,
That's what this is.
Actually in China and in other Asian countries and in Russia, they will often use this berry prior to a sports event to give you extra energy. So just something to think about. It's used a lot for female complaints as well.
And this was developed by the Vavilov Institute, which is basically Russia's Cornell, and it was
Right.
meant for the commercial industry for production as a vitamin. So all over Eurasia, China, Russia, this is used as a vitamin.
So would a deer eat this? I don't think so. And then you
Yeah.
could have this going up a post or on a gate or an entranceway, as long as it's in shade, and it would do really well. But remember, this has to be, if you're looking for just one plant, it needs to be an Eastern Prince
Yeah.
cultivar, or else you can get just
Wild
the regular
seedlings.
wild seedlings.
Yeah.
You never know if they're male or female, since it's a dioecious plant.
And I gotta say, this one Eastern Prince produces thousands of berries.
Yeah.
And you can see last year how loaded that was with
I think
fruit.
this is the year
So,
before.
yeah, completely filled with fruit. So very, very, very much self-fertile.
So we could go on, and actually this was really an abbreviated tour through, I think, 19 of the fruiting plants that we grow at Hortus. And so we're very appreciative of you joining us here, and we have a big thank you to Anne from Polly Hill. And I also want to give a shout out to Randy Beard, who helped us set this up. We were planning on coming out about a month ago or so, and hopefully we'll come out in maybe 2 years from now and
Yeah.
promote our book that we're writing, and also get to walk through a garden that, like Scott said in the introduction, that really inspired us to start our own Arboretum botanical garden in Ulster County. And we'll hang around, and if anyone has questions, we'll just hang tight and we'll look forward to answering them. And we hope that you'll sign up. I send out a newsletter infrequently, and you can do that on the website that is listed. And if you are one of the social media people like I am, I do a post pretty much a day on a plant in the garden with a little bit of information. So please follow us. And thanks again.
Yeah, thank you.
Grateful.
Thanks, Allyson and Scott. That was wonderful.
Thank you.
And I want to echo what you said in thanking Randy Baird for connecting us. And I do hope that we can have you here in a couple of years to promote your forthcoming book.
Yes.
Yes.
It is very exciting.
Yes. And all these plants are in the book.
So we've got a couple of questions here. A few of them are around the same theme, which is people are looking for the specific spellings and names of the plants that you discussed tonight.
Sure.
Yeah.
So one question in particular was, at the very beginning of the talk, you mentioned a plant called Che.
Che,
Yeah.
yes. C-H-E, Che, yes.
C-H-E.
Yes, like Che Guevara. And
Okay.
the science name is Maclura, which is spelled M-A-C-L-U-R-A. And the second name is Tricuspidata, like T-R-I-C-U-S-P-I-D-A-T-A.
Okay. And
And they just want to get a self-fertile female of that plant.
okay. And a couple of people have asked if it would be possible to get a list of the plants that you talked about tonight.
Sure.
And if so, I'd be happy to email that out to everybody who was registered for the talk. If that would be too much trouble.
No, we could send a list of the plants.
Yeah. Numerical. Yeah.
All right. And let me see what else people have wondered. Okay. So one person just commented that they have a single flowering quince, but it fruits. I don't know if you have any thoughts on that.
I do actually. Well, without having the back and forth dialogue, sometimes the flowering quince, if it's an old enough specimen, will produce fruit on its own, not copious amounts. It's also possible that wherever that person's bush is, that there's not one too far off, like in a neighbor's property. That would be my kind of off the cuff thoughts on that.
Okay, thanks.
I should also, one thing we did mention, people, for some reason, people have got into their heads that the fruiting on those plants is a nuisance. So all the new flowering quince cultivars are sterile.
At least in the Hudson Valley, what's available, yes.
So you want to stay away from Scarlet Storm and Orange Storm. Those are the new varietals. They're beautiful. They're double flowered. They have a black label and they say Scarlet Storm, but those are sterile. If you want the fruit, you should get older varietals of it.
Okay, good to know. Next question. Your plant seems so healthy. Do you do anything special for fertilizing each spring or to produce so much fruit?
Well, the first thing we do is I talk a lot to my plants. So that is for real. But the second is, we do spend a lot of time maintaining plants based on what their particular needs are. So when we were talking about gooseberries, for instance, in the spring, we're always putting a handful of ash around the plants first, and then later on we'll go on to compost. So most of the plants, the fruiting plants, will get compost, but something like our blueberries, where we didn't really talk about in this one, or cranberries that we didn't talk about, because those were acid loving, we would go ahead and use pine needles and soil from more acidic areas and kind of help along. So we're constantly adding more soil back into the soil there. That is how we deal with our plants.
I would say we spoil our plants. I try to maintain a 1 to 4 foot ring around our plants where nothing grows. In other words,
no competition
because of like permaculture,
grass, right?
belief in guilds where people stick plants directly together. I think that's okay in one sense, but for us, I don't. I'd like to leave my plants alone, and that's because I've had pests sneak. I've had pests use things planted around tree trunks as ways for drilling holes into trunks and causing trouble. So I want to have clean, dry soil and be able to see what's happening around my plant so that nothing gets in or nothing hurts it.
But we also tell people, if you can't get a hold of enough compost from your own garden, maybe that there is a place nearby that offers it for free or low cost. But at the very least, if you can't even get your hand on compost, adding just new soil every season, doing it in the spring and then again in the fall, is really one way to go to kind of continually to increase the soil benefits and all the nutrients and the organisms that are already there. Because when your plant is growing, it's taking a whole lot from the soil and bringing it through the plant for it to grow. So it's just, that's a very basic way of saying it. Yeah.
Great. One person, I think, maybe missed the last slide and was wondering if you could remind us, what was the last plant you talked about?
Oh, I can't do that, can I?
Schizandra.
Schizandra Vine. Sorry,
Okay.
thought I could do that.
So that's the one that you can use to make something akin to pink lemonade.
Correct.
Right, okay.
The science name is spelled Schizandra, and the second name is chinensis.
But Schizandra should be,
That's from like Siberia and northern China, cold areas, very tough, very cold, hardy, resilient.
Okay, Schizandra chinensis. Okay. And I assume that since you all are in zone 6 and those of us who are here on the vineyard are gardening in zone 7, that pretty much anything you talked about this evening would be hardy in our area too.
Yes, that's right. We actually really were thoughtful when we were putting together this presentation to put in plants that we thought would do well on the vineyard, and maybe some of them were zonally challenging for us early on. As we all know, our zones have changed in the last 15 years and they're going to change again.
Yeah.
So things that we might have struggled with about 18 years ago now seem to be fine. But that's also about plants getting root hardy. And we had talked about some of the plants that we had mentioned might, in the beginning of growing on the vineyard, might die back a little bit every year until the root system gets strong and big enough and then has a woody enough trunk that it should be fine.
Okay. Our next question is, how can you tell the difference between a fruit safe to eat versus one that is poisonous?
If you're not sure, you shouldn't eat.
Yeah.
In our woods, there's not that many things that are poisonous, except for a few things that are white, that are in the poison ivy family. Most things might not taste good, but they're not intensely poisonous.
But I think what Scott just said is, if you don't know,
you don't eat it.
You don't.
Or you take a little tiny taste.
Yeah.
And if it has a weird off-putting taste, you should stop.
Yeah.
There's a few things I've tasted and kind of went, I don't know about this, and so I didn't eat it.
But you're still here.
Yeah.
Okay.
Exactly.
Well, there you go.
By luck.
Yeah. Well, and there, black raspberries are black raspberries. That's one of the best wild fruit. Wild blackberries are wild blackberries.
Right.
Those are fairly easy. Mulberries are mulberries.
Right.
They're fairly easy to identify.
But I guess there'd be, someone might not know what winterberry is versus, what's that, partridge berry?
Yeah, and again, winterberry is not poisonous, but it's probably nasty tasting. You're not going to want to eat it.
Right.
So probably best not to taste something that you haven't had identified by an
That's correct.
Yeah.
Okay. The next person asks, I have a Meyer lemon tree grown from a seed that started sprouting within a lemon. Why won't it bear fruit? I don't know if this is something you all is within your wheelhouse, but
we have a tropical fruit collection, actually. Our house is filled with tropical fruits and I have lots of different citrus.
Okay.
Meyer citrus has, and I'm forgetting the biological term for it, but it passes its gene pool through the mother plant, which means theoretically, if you have a blood orange, if you take a seed from a blood orange, you will have that genetic line, and it should theoretically produce something resembling a blood orange. It will not be exactly that, but it'll be close to that. Meyer lemons are generally taken from a Meyer lemon tree that's been grafted onto grafting rootstock. So if you took a Meyer lemon seed, you're going to have something approaching a Meyer lemon, but it won't be exactly a Meyer lemon. And several times people have given me cuttings and said, this is Meyer lemon. And I took the cutting and put it, and what they didn't realize that their Meyer lemon was grafted onto a rootstock. Their Meyer lemon died and the rootstock grew out. And so I just got their rootstock. And it ends up being a lime or something that is definitely not. Yeah.
Okay. So growing from a seed will not create a clone of the plant.
Exactly.
That's correct.
No, but you'll get somewhat. There's something
in
absolutely
that family,
nothing. But citrus does carry a lot of the gene pool through the seed.
Okay. But your best bet is to grow from a cutting that you know is not the rootstock.
Yeah.
Yeah, unless you like to experiment and just love the act of growing. Yeah. And it's always so much fun to grow something from a seed that you got from your own produce. So I think it's great.
And Meyer lemons can be grown from cuttings too.
Yeah.
Excellent. Okay. And it looks like we have one last question here. Do you grow Kiwi Anna or Kiwi Ken's Red, both hardy to zone 4? If so, how are the flavors? These are listed in Logi's catalog.
Yeah, that's the Chinese kiwi cultivar. And we haven't. I think that probably tastes like Chinese kiwi. And when she said more complex than Arctic kiwi, I would say to me it's like kiwi with a little bit of berry flavor quality, which is nice. I like it. It's a little richer, but it's kiwi. You can tell it's kiwi. So it's probably got that quality of a Chinese kiwi. It's probably good.
It might be a red fruit too. So I know that there's certain cultivars that the actual kiwi fruit itself has a red blush.
Like red flesh,
So, but they are big sprawling vines. So even in large gardens like that we have, having a male and a female plant of that species is plenty.
Yeah, you're gonna get a lot eventually.
So.
Great. Okay, I think that's it for questions. So thank you so much to you both for joining us today.
Thank you for having us.
And anyone who thinks of questions after the fact, feel free to get in touch with Hortus Gardens via their website, or feel free to email info@polyhillarboretum.org. And we can make sure we connect you with Allyson and Scott. So with that, I think we're going to end our event. And we're so grateful that you were here to join us in this virtual lecture. Thank you to you both.
Thank you.
Thank you.